الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس صدق الله العظيم.
Dear participants, let me introduce. Today we have with us Dr. Asad Zaman, Vice Chancellor, Pakistan Institute of Development University. Dr. Sahab has PhD Economics from Stanford University, MS Statistics. Dr. Sahab has more than 80 publications on different topics, author of 2 books, more than 30 years of experience, diversified experience in national, multinational, public and private sector institution on some responsible positions. Dr. Sahab will speak on research methods and will be with us by 11 inshallah. Sir, over to you please, sir. And please cooperate with us. We don't have backup, Dr. Sahab, over to you, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I'm going to talk about topics and ideas that most likely you will not have heard of before. So our topic is research, which is basically another name for the search for knowledge. But what is knowledge? And methodology is how can we acquire knowledge. So now the first thing to understand is that this is a very contested question. This is not something which is agreed upon. If you look at the Wikipedia, it says that the definition of knowledge is a matter of ongoing debate among the philosophers in the field of epistemology. Epistemology is the name of the Greek name of the study or the theory of knowledge. So there is a definition that knowledge is justified true belief. This is the dominant conception of knowledge today. I'm not going to go into it because I don't agree with it, but this definition excludes experience, skill, athletic prowess, creativity, skill, craftsmanship, wisdom, application of knowledge in practical life. All of these things are excluded from the domain of knowledge. And if you think a little bit about your own education, you will see that all of these things are not part of your education, even though they are very important aspects of knowledge. So actually the ancients were wiser than the moderns in this matter. And this impoverished understanding of knowledge is at the heart of the problems that we face today all over the world, where the whole of the planet, the environmental catastrophe is looming, and we are basically, what's happening is that we are destroying the future of humanity for just a few moments of additional pleasure. Not even that, because it's just additional wealth which is being wasted. So the problem is a serious problem of ignorance or lack of knowledge, which is always been the problem actually. So the first thing to understand is that the knowledge is very powerful. Knowledge transformed the world and it continues to shape the world. Knowledge is what differentiates between people. A person with knowledge is valued, and a person without knowledge is not valued. If you come to the Wahi, Allah Ta'ala's message to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam starts with Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq. It starts with the word to read. It's very surprising that in the Muslim Ummah, the maximum amount of illiteracy is there when the first word of the command of Allah is Iqra. It continues that Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam, that Allah Ta'ala taught man that which he did not know. So Allah Ta'ala is actually, if you think about what is happening, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is sitting in the cave of Hira, searching for, he does not know who his Lord is. So Allah Ta'ala is introducing himself, and Allah Ta'ala has 1,000 names and even more characteristics than can be named. So how does he choose to introduce himself? So Allah Ta'ala says, I am the one who teaches man knowledge. So think about what happened as a result of the knowledge that was given to the ignorant and backwards Arabs. It changed them. These people, they were barbarians, savages. They used to bury their daughters alive. They became the most civilized people on the planet, and they became leaders, and they launched a civilization which dominated the world for 1,000 years. So this was very powerful knowledge that was given to them. Now, we have learned, all of us, because we have had a Western education, we have learned a Eurocentric history. A Eurocentric history says that all mankind was in ignorance and superstition until the sun of reason dawned in Europe in the 16th century. And then they became enlightened, and then they learned science and technology and governance, and all the good things that are known to mankind now were invented in Europe after the 16th century. Now this is actually a very wrong story, and we don't have time to actually get into the history, but just think, was the Enlightenment an uncaused event? It suddenly happened that the sun, Europe was in the dark ages, and suddenly the sun of reason rose. How did it happen? Does anybody know?
The Muslims must have conquered, they must have entered Spain.
It was based on Muslim knowledge.
Basically, it was, you see, there was a 700-year-old civilization in Islamic Spain, which was very advanced. It was, and they had millions of books and libraries. So, but in 700 years, you see, the European civilization is not 300 years old. So every civilization, as the Quran says, it has a rise and it has a fall, and it decayed, and it was in decayed and degenerate. And so the reconquest of Spain was completed in 1492. And then these millions of books became available to Europe, and they didn't know what to do with them. And basically the next 2 centuries was the process of absorbing this knowledge that they had suddenly acquired, which they didn't. So in fact, for 1 century, Arabic was spoken in Europe by the intellectuals, and these books were used as textbooks for centuries in Europe. So that's what sparked the Enlightenment. So again, we come to the central question for this talk: what is knowledge, and how do we acquire knowledge? So there are many different types of knowledge, and each of them has its own method of acquisition. But one very important thing to understand is that human beings are built as learning machines. The baby comes out with 0 knowledge, but it very rapidly acquires a lot of knowledge. It learns languages. Allah Ta'ala says that Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran khalaqa al-insana wa allamahu al-bayan. So you see, these babies, if they are in China, they learn Chinese. If they are in France, they learn French. If they are in Africa, they learn Swahili. And if they are in Pakistan, they learn Urdu. And if they are in Japan, they learn Japanese. And now, and they speak it perfectly. And how do they learn? It's not an easy thing. Now you go and try to learn Chinese and you will see how difficult it is. People spend 10 years and they can't speak it fluently, and the baby, it learns the language perfectly. So it has this skill, the ability to learn, And this skill is built into human beings, the ability to do research. What is research? Research is basically looking at the appearances and then reaching the reality which is behind that appearance. This is the real meaning of research. For example, Newton saw the apple fall and he said that there is this hidden force of gravity which is causing this. So this is one example, but there are many other examples. Looking at the creation of the universe and seeing that there must be a God who created it. This is also research. And looking beyond the surface appearance to the reality underneath. That is research. So while there are many different types of knowledge, we have been given all of the equipment necessary. So this is one thing which is very important to understand, because one of the biggest problems in doing research is the fear of incompetence, the feeling that I don't know how to learn, I can't do it, lack of capability. Oh, these differential equations, they are too difficult, I am too stupid, I don't have sufficient talent. All of this is just obstacles to research. Every human being, every baby is given the skills and the talent to learn everything that is necessary to know. There are lots of things which are unnecessary to know. So those things we don't concern about. But in Islam, the most important distinction that is made is between useful knowledge versus useless knowledge. So the Prophet ﷺ, he made the dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmi la yanfa. And so he sought protection of Allah from knowledge that was not useful. And he sought, Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'an. He asked Allah Ta'ala for useful knowledge. So this distinction is very important. And this distinction does not exist in Western education for reasons that we will discuss. So there are basically today there is ignorance. Ignorance is not a difficult thing, not knowing something, but there is knowing the wrong thing. That is more difficult. So Tolstoy said that the most difficult subject can be explained to the most slow-witted person if he has not any idea about it. But the simplest thing cannot be explained to the most intelligent man if he knows firmly, already he knows this thing. So the preconception that I already know something is a very difficult thing to. And so if you already know something which is wrong, then the first step that is required to acquire knowledge is to unlearn those things. And then unlearning is more difficult than learning. So unlearning the harmful knowledge that we have all acquired in the course of our Western education, this is the first step to the ability to do research correctly. So the bedrock of Western education that we have all received is a secular modern ideology which lies at the foundation. It's not explicitly discussed, but basically there is a worldview that this world the universe came into existence without any cause. Life has no meaning. Matter is everything that exists. There is no invisible, there is no soul. There is no even thought, because thought is an abstraction. There is no afterlife. No one is looking after us. I mean, if we do something good, nobody cares. If we do something bad, there's no consequences. So every human being gets to choose their own purpose. And all knowledge is equivalent. So what are the purposes for which we live? Well, given that there is no afterlife, these have to be wealth, fame, popularity, luxuries, status, power, pleasure. These are all of the things that are the goals of life that we are taught, careers. So Now, the useful knowledge that Islam stresses is useful because it is used to achieve some purpose. And the purpose is also specified. So something is harmful if it doesn't help you to achieve a purpose, and something is useful if it helps you to achieve the purpose. But if there is no purpose, then there is no distinction between useful and useless. So all knowledge is equally useful. If you like it, it's useful for you. So this lack of distinction, this is a huge problem of Western education, which since we have all been trained in it, we don't see it, just like a fish doesn't sense the water that surrounds it. But it is there. If you think about your own education, you have been taught a lot of things which are completely useless. Probably you have learned advanced calculus and you will never use it in your life. And a huge number of things that you have learned will never be used by you. And it is not that there was nothing to learn. There is a huge number of very important things that you could have been taught that were valuable. But for reasons that would be too complicated to go into here, you were taught useless things and you were not taught things which would be extremely useful.
Sir?
Yes.
I have a question. Sir, how we gonna differentiate between the useful knowledge and
This is what my lecture is about.
Sir, you are saying this.
Yes. So, to begin with, the first question to ask before we can understand how to differentiate between useful and useless knowledge is, what is the purpose of my life? Because use is always useful for some purpose. What is useful is not... So, before we can understand what is useful and what is useless, we have to think about what is the meaning of my life. All human action is goal-oriented. We are trying to achieve something. So what are we trying to achieve? Very often, the purpose is hidden. And people will state that this is my purpose, but actually they will do something else. And so, this is where the first object of research is. What is the purpose of my life? Not according to what I say or what I think, but according to what I do. You have to do research into your own soul, into your own heart. So, what is your purpose? So, you can't do it by thinking. You have to look at your actions. What do you like to do? What do you dislike? So, if there is something you like to do, then that is what defines your purpose. For example, if somebody is watching movies and wasting time on Facebook, etc., then that you can deduce what the purpose of his life is. It's to be entertained, to, well, there are many things that you can. So, knowledge which enables you to achieve your goal, this is useful knowledge. Knowledge which prevents you from realizing your goals is harmful knowledge. But, from the Islamic point of view, some goals are good and some goals are bad. Now, this is something which is different from Western education, because according to the West, every person is free. You can choose your goals, so there is nothing we can say about this purpose is a good purpose of life and this purpose is a bad purpose of life. Because all purposes are equivalent, because every human being is God. And he is free to define his own purpose. So, in order to learn about ourselves, and we don't have time to do this experiment, but it is an internal examination of your own soul. Think that if you have Aladdin's lamp and you have 3 wishes, what would you ask for? So, if you think about this, then you will be able to look into what it is that you want to get. What is it that life, your life is going to be spent for? Because those things that you want to get, these are your goals. Today, I will not, we could run this experiment, but the world's most popular and widespread religion is the worship of the nafs. This is called individualism. I define my own purpose. If I like something, that is my goal. I have to achieve it. Nobody else should come in the way of my achieving this goal. Individualism means that everyone pursues their own desires. And desires are the gods. And basically, economics formalizes, it says that the purpose of life is the maximization of pleasure achieved by consumption. And furthermore, it says that all human beings act like this. And so all of the economic theory that you study is based on the assumption that every human being maximizes pleasure, even though this is not true empirically and it's not true normatively. So, there is a lot of unlearning that we need to do. One of the most important things that we need to unlearn, both from the point of view of personal satisfaction and also from the point of view of understanding the world around us, is that we have to unlearn the Coca-Cola theory of happiness. So you see, if you think about it, that suppose that there is one person, he was very hot and thirsty, and then he drank a cup of cool Coca-Cola and he felt this is like heaven. So wonderful, so pleasure. So he said, oh, now I have got it. This is how happiness is achieved. So he built a house and he built a sauna with very hot air, and then he steps into the sauna, becomes very hot and thirsty, and then he comes out and he drinks Coca-Cola. This is his formula for happiness. So basically the economists have essentially the same theory of happiness, that if you want to be happy, just eat. The more you eat, the more you will be happy, and you maximize lifetime consumption, you will maximize your happiness. And furthermore, they believe that everyone has this theory of happiness. Actually, if this is really the goal of life, then actually there's more efficient ways. Today, the biologists have discovered, they've done a lot of research into the brain. So there is a small center of the brain which is called the pleasure center. If you put an electrode in there and stimulate it, you become extremely happy. I mean, they have done experiments on rabbits.
They've also done it on men actually in Israel. It really worked, yeah.
Yeah, so these rabbits, they have these two pellets, one that give you food and one that gives you pleasure. So they found that the rabbits would keep pressing the pleasure lever until they died of hunger, because it's so powerful, the pleasure stimulant. So if that's the goal, then we should all lie on hospital beds. Now they have the capability to feed us intravenously. So you don't need food. You can just one needle going into your blood, which will provide you with nutrition, the other electrode in your brain, and you have achieved the goal of life, success. So actually, Richard Easterlin, he did it was assumed, and it is still assumed by economists, that the maximization of consumption is what leads to happiness. But Easterlin saw something which is very clear, once you think about it, is that the correlation between consumption and happiness is only short run. You drink Coca-Cola, you become happy for a moment. But it is, if you look at the long run, there is no correlation between, zero correlation between consumption and pleasure. Zero happiness. So then a whole field of happiness studies got started, and there was a lot of research, and basically the answer they have come up with as to what are the sources of long-term happiness are the ones that we have known for centuries. One is contentment, to have the ability to feel content with what you have in your heart. This is related to gratitude, feeling of shukr. This is also related to generosity. If you give to others, then it makes you happier. So exactly opposite of what the economists say. Instead of if you eat a meal for 5,000 rupees at Serena, you will get a stomachache. But if you use this 5,000 rupees and stay hungry and feed hungry children, it will make you much happier, and this happiness will last for a long time. 10 years later, you will think that, oh, that was a wonderful time when I was able to do this for some other people. So the long-run sources of happiness are very, very different from the short-run sources of happiness. All of modern economic theory, which we are using for policy making today, is based on wrong assumptions about human welfare. So, many things that we need to unlearn. One of them is the deep misunderstanding of man that has been created in the West because of, again, a long history which we cannot recall here. But basically, the West came to think of men as rational robots. They have brains, but they have no hearts, they have no souls. So there is a very familiar philosophical device that a human being can be just a brain suspended in a vat of fluids and being fed sensations. So that's what human beings are according to Western social theories. So men are pleasure machines. B.F. Skinner, the most important psychologist of the 20th century, behavioral psychology, he wrote the book called Beyond Good and Evil. And basically he says, the internal emotions of human beings, the psychology, these are all unobservables. They are not scientific because science is based on observable. So we will look only at behavior. So basically the Skinner theory, which was the dominant school of psychology for many years until it was discovered that it doesn't work, was this idea that human beings are robots. The baby is born with nothing. It receives stimulus, which is something comes from the outside, and then it makes a response. And the stimulus response, by controlling the stimulus and response patterns, we can program this robot in any way we like. There is nothing inside. So basically, over 20, 30, 40 years, the psychologists discovered that this is wrong. You cannot predict human behavior by looking at the stimulus response. So if somebody is placed in very difficult circumstances, it might break his spirit, and he might then become depressed and collapse psychologically. Or some other people, it might make stronger, and it might say that yes, okay, I can take this and I can take even worse. So it is what inside the man that determines how he responds to circumstances. So you cannot predict what human being is going to do just by looking at all of the stimulus and response patterns. So the Western framework in which we study human beings are worthless, are very cheap. Economic theory teaches you that the value of your life is according to your marginal product. If you can contribute to the creation of wealth, then you are a valuable person. So human capital, human resource, all of these things. Human beings are valuable only to the extent that they can contribute to the creation of wealth. If somebody has zero income, if somebody cannot earn, then his life is worth zero, according to standard actuarial calculations that are made. The value of life is the discounted sum of the stream of earnings. Now, this is in contrast with the message of Islam that every life is infinitely precious. Allah Ta'ala says that if you save a life, it is as if you have saved the entire humanity. So, every human being has huge potential. Every human being can change the world. The heart and the soul are very powerful, and they are more powerful than matter. And that is why, you see, that is one of the things that we have been taught, the materialistic theory that we all have been trained in teaches us that, the amount of influence that I exercise on the earth depends on my mass. If I have very small, I have 80 kilos of mass, then thousands and thousands of tons, millions of tons is present in earth. I can't have any effect on this. I'm too small. But when you look at the world of spirit and heart, then you find that many people in the course of history have changed the world by their visions, their ambitions, and their actions. And so, spirit is more powerful than matter. This is something that is not obvious to anyone who has been brought up in the materialistic worldview, and that is the worldview in which we are all trained. So, coming back to the question, what is useful knowledge? Useful knowledge is that which can achieve us, which can help us to achieve the right goals, not the Coca-Cola goals. So, the Prophet ﷺ has defined one of the characteristics of useful knowledge. Useful knowledge is that which enters the heart. So, useful knowledge is holistic. It is not fragmented, specialized. Now, Western education, since the goal of life is to produce wealth, so Western education tries to turn everything into a wealth-making machine. So the object of the Western education is to turn every person into a cog which fits into the machine. So this leads to basically specialization. Don't worry about everything. You've been given this file. Just do the needful. You do not think about where it came from and where it is going to. So there's fragmentation, there's specialization. The fact that every human being is unique, this must be taken out, because if you are unique, then you will not fit into the machine properly. So the fact that even if you have twins, everyone has, see, if you think about the uniqueness instead of the standardization, think of yourself as not as a human resource, not as a human capital, think of yourself as a human being, then you will realize that you are completely unique. Allah Ta'ala has manufactured you and has given you experiences which nobody else has, and nobody else can even learn about them, because you go and sit and you explain, you will never be able to explain. You have a lifetime of experience. Even your own, even if you have a twin brother, he will have completely different experiences from you. So everyone is unique. Everyone has been given capabilities that are unique. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that human beings are like mines. Inside them is some precious stone which is unique to that person. Everyone has been given capabilities. Human beings are like, all of the treasure on this planet cannot buy one human life. So there's no marginal productivity. Human beings are like seeds which have amazing potential. A seed, you see, if you think about it, it's a miracle that occurs before our eyes, so we don't appreciate it. But if you look at the seed, it goes into the soil. It has no eyes, it has no arms, and yet it collects thousands of different chemicals and manufactures roots and bark and leaves and fruits, and collects energy, manufactures a water pump to take water pump from the ground and push it up, manufactures an energy by absorbing the rays of sunlight and using the chlorophyll in the leaves to convert it into energy. It is a miracle. So human beings are the greatest of the creations of God, and they are even greater miracles, and they have even greater potential. So knowledge now we can define useful knowledge is that knowledge which will allow us to develop the hidden capabilities that are buried inside our hearts. So there are many aspects to this. The first thing is to acquire self-knowledge. Who am I? Am I just a robot, stimulus response? I should maximize the amount of wealth that I am trying to earn. I should try to maximize pleasure. Is that what my life is for? Well, you can look at those people who followed that path and see what happened to them. So there are many examples. You can go on the internet and search for advice for people from people who are dying, and you will find the same thing everybody writes. It's not that we were going after the wrong things in life. We were looking for career and we were looking for money, but now that I have only a few months to live, I understand that it is my relationships, my family, people who are important, and many things that I put on the side and turned out to be very important. Many things that I thought were the only thing in life, the getting of the next promotion, I thought that this my life hung on it, and it makes no difference. So how can we change our goals to better goals, so that our life, so that we don't learn this when we are dying? So we have to unlearn self-sufficiency. The Western education tells us that you can figure out the answers for yourself. We can figure out the answers using facts and logic and experience. But the amazing thing, we have all been taught that experience is a good teacher. But this is not true. Experience does not teach us anything, because experience has to be analyzed. See, experience is just a collection of facts. I try something and I fail. So now I learned from experience that I should not try it. Or I learned from experience that I should try it differently. So the same experience, but different theory. So you have to have the right theory applied to that experience in order to get learning. The wrong theory combined with that experience will teach you the wrong things. Actually, they did a study of whether people learn from experience when they have close accidents. Because you see, they were trying to study driving accidents. So what causes them? So one of them is lack of skill in driving. So if somebody has a narrow escape in an accident, then he should learn that I'm making some mistake, I should correct it. But rather, people, instead of this, people think that I'm very skillful and I can avoid these. And so they get the wrong lessons, and this causes fatal accidents later, because they don't correct the mistake that led to that near accident. So people practically do not learn from experience like they should. And yet, there is this illusion of expertise, illusion of knowledge. So, what is useful knowledge? Well, one of the problems is that those who don't have knowledge cannot evaluate that knowledge. If I don't know medicine, then if there are two doctors and they give me their different diagnosis, as often happens, that this is the cause and this is the reason, and they can give their whole explanation, I will not be able to understand it. And if there are two doctors with very dramatically different, one of them says that you should go for surgery and the other one says that you should have this medicine, there is no way I can decide. So then how should I judge? So this is a very difficult problem, a genuine, serious problem, that how can I find out? Everybody is claiming that I have useful knowledge. So which leader should I follow? Since I cannot evaluate the knowledge itself, I don't have the competence to evaluate the knowledge. So Imam al-Ghazali, he had written Ihya Ulumuddin, in which he had summarized all extant knowledge. He said that now I have acquired all the knowledge that is, except for one branch, which is tasawwuf. And they claim to have a knowledge which cannot be acquired by the mind. So what I will do now is I will spend 10 years studying this, and then acquiring the experience which leads to this knowledge. And then if I learn that this is a fraud, I will denounce it to the world. Otherwise, I will accept it. So he spent 10 years. And it is said that after 10 years, he came back to the town, and he was a very famous professor, and some people were talking about his book, and he felt pride, and he said that, oh, I haven't completed my training. He went back. So, the knowledge cannot be evaluated as to directly as to whether this is correct or wrong, but we can look at the effects of that knowledge on the people who have it. So now we consider the knowledge that was given by Islam, teachings of Islam, to the ignorant Arabs. And we look at the effects on history. These people, if you look at any objective, you should read the book by Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, The Decline of Islam and Its Effects on the World. So he describes the Jahiliyyah, where everybody was in darkness, and suddenly, and the Arabs were the most backwards people on the planet. There was advanced civilizations at the time. There was China, Iran, Persia, Iran, Greece, Egypt. They had advanced technologies. They had pyramids, they had shipbuilding, they had many. And the Arabs were very backwards. They were Bedouins, and they lived in primitive conditions. But this knowledge made them leaders of the world. So what was this knowledge? And do we have this knowledge? Does this knowledge have the same power today? Today we are ignorant and backwards, and we are at the bottom of the pile when it comes to many characteristics, many dimensions. So does the message of Islam have the same power today that it had 1400 years ago? That's something to consider. At the same time, think about what has happened as a result of the Western knowledge that we have. The last century has been the bloodiest century in the history of mankind. The 2 world wars led to deaths of more than 50 million people. Today, more than 1 billion people live lives at under $1 a day, while 8 people have more than half the planetary wealth. And this situation is getting worse. The concentration of wealth at the top is increasing, and the misery at the bottom is increasing. So, the planetary resources are being destroyed at a rate that the climatologists say that human life will not be sustainable in another 30 years unless we do something to change. And people are trying to change but are unable to make those changes. Profit maximization has become the norm. So there is a injection, I was just there, for epinephrine, which is sort of life-saving. If somebody has a severe allergic reaction, and some people do, they have to carry this injection around with them, because if they inject it right away, then it will save their life. Otherwise, they can go into shock and die. So it's a life-saving drug. So it costs $630 today to buy that injection in the USA. The same injection costs 20 rupees in Pakistan. 30,000. Why? The that makes it has increased the price every year. It started out at $100 5-6 years ago, and every year they increase the price by $100 because they are maximizing profits. So this is what is taught. Today, in Pakistan, you see, 30 years ago, a doctor in Pakistan, if he said, I'm entering this profession because I want to make money off of the misery of the poor people, he would not have been able to say it. It would be socially unacceptable. People would say that he is a bad person. But today, 30 years later, after a lot of indoctrination, if somebody says, I am studying medicine because I want to help the poor and I want to serve humanity, people will laugh. We will say that he is just being hypocritical. So this is how much the world has changed. The schools, I saw this, there was a school which used to have said, one of the pillars, the entrance gate says, enter to learn and leave to serve on the other gate. Now they have rubbed it out and said, enter to learn and leave to earn. Making money is the goal of life, and this making money weakens family, community, relationships. The wife has to earn and the husband has to earn. Nobody has time for the children. They also have to go and earn. So nobody has time to go and visit friends and socialize, because all of this will reduce your human capital and ability to earn. Everybody is engaged in the production of wealth. But this is not good for us. This is poisonous. Knowledge is required for self-transformation. So the purpose of life has been given by Allah Ta'ala as Allah Ta'ala created life and death to test, to see which of you can do the best of deeds. So life is a competition, but it is not the competition to earn more and more money. The competition is to see who can do the best deed. So then this is what the early Muslims learned, and this is what changed the world. And this is what we have forgotten, and that is why our conditions are much different from those. The value of our deeds does not depend on how much money they will make. It depends on the intention with which they are done. Today, what is dominant in the world is Western ideas, which are the opposite of the truth. And because we have absorbed them, they have poisoned our minds and hearts. But for a Muslim audience, they also have at the same time in their heart the true ideas. These are built into human beings, in the fitrah, in the nature of human beings. So they are understood by everybody. Even non-Muslims can understand these things. So the way to arrive at the truth is to take your beliefs and say, what if the opposite of this is true? So consider that we have been trained to be selfish. The economic theory says that every human being is selfish. This is rational, and this is natural, and this is normal. So let's look at the other extreme. So suppose I make the intention that I will seek nothing for myself. I will only seek to serve humanity. And actually, if you look at, there is a hadith that would see that all of the creation is the family of God. So, and those who serve them are close to God. So actually serving humanity out of the love of God is the highest form of worship. Now, how can I maximize the amount of service, the benefit that I can give to others without seeking anything for myself? That is the opposite of the dominant, where the doctors seek to make money from the misery of others. So maximization requires knowledge and intelligence. How can you can do random acts of charity, but that's not maximization. And Prophet ﷺ, when somebody came to him with lots of money, he said, what should I do with this? He said, okay, why don't you make a waqf? And he could have said, okay, give it all to the poor, but he didn't say that. Make a waqf, take the earnings from this waqf and spend it on charity. That way, your charity will last forever. So this is a very intelligent way of spending money, that not spending all the money right away seems like a great thing to do, but it is not an intelligent way to do charity. This was the model, the waqf, which was used for 1,000 years in Islam to feed, educate, house, clothe, take care of orphans, take care of widows, everything. About 1/3 of all the land registered in the Ottoman Empire was waqf. And waqf were used for financing all social welfare activities. And the Quran is full of exhortations that spend on others. So Allah Ta'ala says that لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. So He is telling us about what we need to do in order to arrive at the good, to achieve the inner self-transformation. Love of goods, possession, wealth, money is built into our hearts. Because without this love, there would be no test. We are put on this planet as a test. If there was no love of money, there was no love. In fact, Yusuf alayhi salam says in the Quran that Inna nafsa la ammaratin bisu, that the nafs always calls towards the evil. So the nafs is built in order to create a test. If there was no nafs, if there was no desire to do bad things in our heart, then we would be angels. In that case, there is no merit. There is no sawab for doing good deeds. So that is why man has potentially a higher position than the angels, because when he does good deeds, it's much more difficult for him. But at the same time, Allah Ta'ala says that ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ, that he has been created in the best of forms. He can achieve position higher than the angels, but he can also become worse than the beasts if he gives in to all his desires. So, if I want to arrive at knowledge, then the first thing to do is to think about how I can best serve the ummah. Now the thing is that this is actually, if I want to achieve satisfaction from life, pleasure, the thing that the greedy maximizers of Coca-Cola theory are seeking, I will do better than them. Because it turns out, and empirically, that even if you don't believe in Akhirah, and even if you don't believe in God, service to others, this is built into the fitrah of man, that if he helps others, genuine sincerity, love, kindness, compassion, bring more pleasure to man than greed and grabbing from others and exploiting and oppressing and power games. These things actually cause, as the Quran describes, cause your heart to become black, and then you cannot experience pleasure. So now, if you want to do service, then you will have to do something which you are the opposite of what is taught in Western education. When I was taught, I was learning econometrics, I was told that, there are two types of econometrics. One is the theoretical type, in which you derive formulas and you have nothing to do with data, and the other is the applied type. So this is one illustration of what is called fragmentation. You do your own little bit, and you are not concerned with how this is used. So they hire genetic scientist, a biologist, and they say that, okay, here is this variety of wheat. This has 10 times the productivity of all existing wheat on the planet currently. We have manufactured it, but we don't want to sell this because it is not because people will buy it once and then they will use the seeds. So what I want you to do is to genetically modify it to create a terminating seed. So even though this will produce seed, the seed will not be fertile. So every year they have to buy, the poor people who are growing wheat. So the technologist says, okay, you pay me a salary of $1 million and I will invent it. So he does not see the effect of this action. And so they did it. And so they have lots of products like this. Monsanto is famous. They developed a seed in which if you plant this, your neighbor's ordinary crops will die, so that, and the only thing that will grow is your seed. So once somebody takes it, then everybody else is forced to buy Monsanto seeds because there's nothing else. So these are the physicists who were developed the atom bomb. They said that, I was only carrying orders. Now Islam does not permit this. It says that the one who points towards the good is like the doer. So if you take one small piece of the action, you are responsible for the whole project. So you cannot divorce yourself from the consequences of your actions. I was just doing a little research study, and how it is used is up to him. No, you have to look at the big picture. Why am I being asked to do this research? What will this be used for? Will it create good or will it create evil? If the research is going to be used for evil purpose, then you can refuse to do it, and you should. Or, better, if that will make your boss angry, offer them a better alternative. Explain why this is wrong, and explain how to do the things better. There are many opportunities like this.
How do you add unforeseen consequences of your research?
Unforeseen consequences you're not responsible for. So we are only responsible for La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha. So the basis for our actions must be compassion for all humanity. We must seek to serve humanity. Our Prophet was rahmatul lil alameen. And so we must open our heart to the pain of others. And this is the only way to feel compassion for others. And this is a paradox because those people who are open to the suffering of the others are the only ones who are capable of feeling joy and happiness. Arsh ki ye bulandiyan farsh ki pastiyon se hain. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran that لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. That there has come to you a messenger from among yourselves. Grievous to him is what you suffer, and he is concerned about you, and to the believers he is kind and merciful. One of the characteristics of the Prophet was that the suffering of others he felt very deeply in his heart, and he wanted to. In fact, Allah Ta'ala says to him, "Oh, my Prophet, will you kill yourself with sorrow if they don't believe you?" Because he found it so painful that people were not accepting to listen to his message to save themselves from the hellfire. He was full of concern for the welfare of all human beings, not just the believers. So the heart is the driver of action. If our heart has the right feelings, then we will have the energy to act in the ways that we need to. Otherwise, we cannot. It is too difficult. So once the energy is there, then the action is required. Allah Ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. So this is a very different theory of education from the one that you have learned implicitly in the West. So knowledge does not come by sitting at desks and listening to talks. It comes by struggling to achieve the good outcomes. So if we struggle and try to create a positive change, then how we need to do this will be taught to us in the process of the struggle. It's very different from taking a textbook and studying it. So, one of the things that we need to unlearn, which is very important, is the illusion of foreign expertise, that I don't know anything. The textbooks that we studied, they had a lot of material that I didn't study, so I am not capable of providing good policy advice. This is just wrong. The situations we face are unique. Nobody else has better understanding of this than us. I will give you just one example, but there are thousands of this. The current director of NIBAF is Amir Aziz, and he came to me several years ago, 5-6 years ago, that, I have some ideas about microfinance. We want to hire a foreign professor in order to come and do research on this. I said, look, you know more about this than any foreign professor. I argued, but he didn't agree with me. So they hired a foreign professor. He came for 6 months and then he left. And finally he said that, okay, I will do it myself. And he wrote the paper on microfinance based on his own experiences. This idea that some foreigner can come into Pakistan and help us solve our problems, this is complete illusion. There is nothing. Actually, those who have experience, they say that, it takes them 2 years to figure out which end is up, and then they have to leave. So, our problems are our own problems. If I am having difficulty with my wife, I will not ask a third party to tell me. This is something I have to figure out for myself. So, just like that, our economy, our society, our culture is unique. We can take advice from others, but basically our problems are ours to solve, and nobody else can solve them better than us. So, problems are often particular, special, one of a kind, which cannot be, and we have been given the equipment necessary to solve our problems. So this is what tawakkul is, that Allah Ta'ala will guide you to the solution if you ask Him. The second important thing which we need to learn is that it is the process which matters, not the outcomes. We are supposed to struggle to achieve the good results. Whether or not the good results come into being is not something which we will be questioned about. So, this means that we are here for a lifelong struggle. And as long as we are engaged in the struggle, we are not asked to win. The believer is never satisfied with learning. He keeps learning until death, until he enters paradise. Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. So, when you think about process, then you see success is instantaneous. At this point, I am facing a situation, and in this situation, if I make the right decision, the one that is the most valuable for the ummah, the one that is most pleasing to Allah, then I have succeeded. I don't need to wait to see what will happen, whether or not this process will bring a good outcome. My wife is a doctor, and she was, in her training, she was in a neonatal intensive care unit, and a baby came in very difficult conditions. So she asked her senior, I'm very nervous. What if I do something and this baby dies? He said, there's nothing here. There's nothing to be nervous about. There's only 3 things we can do. And you just do these 3 things, and if he survives, he survives. That's all we are capable of. There's nothing else. So, if you've done what you can, then if the baby dies, that's what was written. And so the basic thing is that if I do what is in my power to do, then nothing else is relevant. That's all that I'm asked to do. That's all I'm mukallaf for. Unfortunately, what happens most often is that we keep worrying about how he did not do the right thing, and how she did not do the right thing, and how they did not do the right thing, and I never worry about whether I did the right thing or not. So, And then if I'm asked why you didn't do the right thing, they say, oh, everybody is doing wrong things, so how can I do the right thing? I was the Director General in Islamic University, and at one point I gathered the employees and I said, look, I've been told that you're all charging overtime and you're not there, so this is not permissible, not halal for you. This money that you're earning is... He said, oh, what can we do? The administration is so corrupt. They're always doing wrong things. So at one meeting in the administration, I asked the same question, that look, they are saying that we follow our leaders. So how come you are behaving in these ways which are obviously not correct? You're hiring incompetence and you're promoting incompetence and you're doing lots of things that are wrong. They said, look, we live in Pakistan. What can we do? This is how things are done in Pakistan. So I had the opportunity to meet some senior people, secretaries and ministers, and I said, look, this is what they said. What do you think? They said, look, you see, Saudi Arabia is our leader. If they reform, then we will also reform. So I never got the chance to ask the Saudis, but I'm sure they have some explanation also.
They'll send it to the US.
Yes, right. So the thing is that we are all individually responsible for our own selves. It doesn't matter if the whole world is gone astray. If I am on the right path, Allah Ta'ala recognizes me and rewards me. And if the whole world is doing the right thing but I am doing wrong, I will not be able to survive. So the question is, we come back to the original question, that Islam was a very powerful message and very successful in changing the world. How come it seems to have lost its power? So the first thing is that the Muslims are currently in what has been called Jahl Murakkab, which is translated to compound ignorance. They believe that I already know the teachings of Islam. Since I already know the teachings, if they had any value, I would have seen it. Or if the teaching of Islam had any value, the Muslims would not be in the current condition that they are. This means that the solution does not lie in Islamic teachings. We have to follow the West, we have to do this, that and the other, we have to get more PhDs, we have to get more technology, we have to improve our FDI, this, that and the other, we have to follow the Washington Consensus. So this misunderstanding that we already know the message of Islam is a great barrier to trying to learn Islam, because you don't try to learn something that you already know. But the question is, okay, if you know Islam, then explain to me how it was that this Islam took the ignorant and backwards Arabs to the leadership of the world. What was it in this message? Was it that they were making 5 times prayers a day and that's what led them to the world leadership? Well, that was one element, because it developed their spirituality and souls and created a connection with God, but that was not what is called the effective reason, the apparent reason, the one that you see acting in the world. There are many reasons which are hidden beneath the surface, and then there are active reasons. So everything in this happens in the world with active reasons, with things that you can see, except for a few rare exceptions of miracles. So the basic, so if this message, does it have the same power today? Can it change us? Can it lead us from the ignorance and backwardness that we are currently in to the leadership of the world today? Does it have the same power? Well, one of the keys to this message was that it made the Muslims thirsty for knowledge, for useful knowledge, for correct knowledge. If you think about the Adam alayhi salam was taught the names and then the angels made sajda to him. So this is the value of knowledge. The ink of the scholars is more precious than the blood of the martyrs. Allah Ta'ala teaches us to pray to Him, Rabbi Zidni Ilma. the thirst for knowledge based on the right foundations was the secret of the success of Islam. Today, I don't see any thirst for knowledge. My students ask, "You're teaching us this, will it come on the exam?" So if it doesn't come on the exam, then I'm not interested in learning. If it comes on the exam, then it will help to get my degree. With my degree, I will get my job. With my job, I will make money. So otherwise, all of these things are irrelevant. Knowledge has no value. Today, if the greatest scholar in the world was coming to Civic Center, we would be gathering up the peons and taking them to make the crowd. But if the singer in the world was coming, then it would automatically fill up the convention center. So the thirst for knowledge is not there. Actually, it is narrated that in Baghdad, when Imam Bukhari used to give his dars, there were so many people who were writing and they had this ink, that the Dajla would become dark with the ink that was thrown in it. That was the level of thirst for knowledge that Muslims had when we were leaders of the world. And having lost this thirst for knowledge, we are now ignorant and backwards. So, one of the key reasons, there are many, but one of the most important reasons is this illusion of foreign expertise, this Buddha of Western knowledge that we all worship. Because you see, we have before our eyes, they have the rocket ships and the atom bombs and the biotechnology and this, that, and the other, this computer, everything. I mean, our eyes show us that the West is far, 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 far ahead of us. So how can we possibly question anything that they say? This lack of self-confidence by defeat in wars for centuries and being backwards in many, many different dimensions. This leads us to be unable to question anything that is said by the West. So, the thing to understand is that knowledge of external reality is different from the knowledge of internal reality. If the man is the greatest physicist in the world, doesn't mean that he knows how to treat his wife correctly. In fact, one of my teachers was Joseph Stiglitz, who won a Nobel Prize in economics. His wife, Charlotte, ran away with another economist. So, earning a Nobel Prize in economics doesn't give you the...
satisfy her.
Yeah. Well, doesn't know how to be any...
Economists in the danger.
So...
Choose another economist. Why choose another economist?
Yeah. So, the point that I'm trying to make is that knowledge of how to split atoms doesn't give us the knowledge of what is in the hearts of men. And if you look at the theories, Western theories about human beings, they are very primitive, very bad. All of economics is based on the assumption that people are homo economicus, and this has been completely disproven. So the idea that social science is the same as physical science, this is something which the West tells us, unfortunately, and we believe it, is very different. Social science is built, you see, on the understanding of human beings. If you want to do social science, you have to if you want to understand human behavior, you have to understand human purposes. It doesn't, I'm not saying that all people have to have the purpose to please God. Even the Muslims don't have this purpose. But if you want to understand human beings, you have to understand what their purpose is. And the purpose of human beings is very complex. It's not just maximization of wealth. So, just as an objective matter, if you want to understand how human beings behave, how societies are, what families are, then you have to have a better, more sophisticated theory of human beings, which we have. We have been born with it. We understand human beings. We live our lives and we acquire understanding of human beings. And so we can do much better at social science than the West has. And the social science of the West has been a complete failure, judging by outcomes, not by the techniques. If you look, world wars, all across, and for 8 years, every day, Obama was involved in some war, and he was killing people every day, assigning orders to kill innocents, who were, the only accusation was they might in some day do something against America. That was their fault for which they were killed. So, wars which destroyed Iraq, destroyed Libya, destroyed Syria, all for just political reasons. The Madeleine Albright, the foreign secretary of USA, she was asked on TV, you can see this on YouTube, that, we have killed 500,000 children in Iraq. Is it really worth it? She said, yeah, it's...
Collateral damage.
yeah, it's all right, Yani, for the sake of
Great
more oils, we can kill 500,000 children. This is, this is a senior leader in the West, and this is the level of darkness in the hearts of people that has arrived because of wrong ideas at the foundations of social science. So, there are no experts out there who can tell us how to lead our lives and how to run our nations and how to run our organizations, how to run our... And we are... so we have to first empower ourselves, take confidence. Now, confidence in Islam is self-confidence is very different from self-confidence in the Western terminology, because in Islam we don't have any confidence in our own selves because we know nothing. But we have confidence in Allah Ta'ala that He can give us the guidance to take the right actions. So this trust, this tawakkul is the basis for our confidence. So, now let's see, I think we are coming to the end of our time. And so I'll just give one, I've given several techniques and ideas about how one approaches knowledge, but one of the most important things that is not taught to you is that one needs to study the archaeology of knowledge. You need to, if you want to understand an idea, we have been taught binary thinking. I was taught binary thinking. Take this idea and ask, is it true or is it false? So this is not the right approach. In fact, the right approach is to look at the sanad of idea. Where did this idea come from? Who first said it? Why did they say it? When you look at the evolution, then you understand the idea much better. For example, today everybody is talking about good governance. And certainly it's plausible, good governance is useful. But when did this talk start? So if you look at this, then you find that the World Bank started this Washington Consensus, which was the idea that free markets would lead to miracles and privatization and this, that, and the other. There's 10 points in the Washington Consensus: liberalization, low taxes, small government. This failed. Over 10 years, over 1990s, this was tried all over the world, and evaluations after this, including World Bank's own evaluation, says that this didn't work. It didn't have the desired outcomes. So there was a lot of blame being put on World Bank. 50 years is enough campaign was started that we've tried these liberal policies, free market friendly policies for 50 years and it hasn't worked. It has only increased poverty and it has caused harm to development. So the World Bank had to find an excuse. So there was a paper that was written that, well, the reason for this failure is good governance. Lack of good governance is what's causing the failure of our policies. So this was the excuse, and it was rapidly picked up and then it became part of. So this is the And similarly, the East Asian crisis was caused by bad advice from the West for financial liberalization. And then when it occurred, it was blamed on inherent weaknesses in East Asian structure and regimes. So today the story that is dominant and widely believed is not the real story. You have to understand, for example, Islamic terrorism. Today in the USA and Europe, the chances of being killed by an Islamic terrorist are about a little bit less than being struck by lightning. So it's not a big problem. But trillions are being spent, and this is being thought of as the biggest problem that the world is facing today. Why? Well, basically, if you look at the history, after the collapse of Russia, the huge Pentagon, the military-industrial complex in the USA, which was making billions and billions in dollars, suddenly had nothing to do. The US Congress started talking about the peace dividend, that now we are at peace, we can dismantle the Pentagon and we can reduce salaries, we can reduce armed forces. They said, oh, our money is going away. So then they engineered this war between Iraq and Kuwait, where they actually provoked Iraq into, and it's all open, and they provoked Iraq into attacking Kuwait, and they said that, look, if you attack Kuwait, we'll do nothing. Then when Iraq attacked Kuwait, they encouraged Kuwait to do slant drilling, to go into Iraq to get the oil, because so to create a provocation. And then they encouraged Iraq to attack Kuwait. And then they did the Operation Desert Shield, I think it was. Meanwhile, in the Congress, the bills to go for the peace dividend were stopped. That no, look, still things are going on. We need to keep our military. Meanwhile, they thought of a strategy. How can we? This was just a temporizing move to keep things in place while they thought of a new strategy, and they came up with this new strategy, which was the war of civilizations. No. US is so much bigger than anybody else on this planet that they could not maintain a war machine nobody else was prepared to stand up against them. There was just nobody of that size. So they said, okay, we'll take on all of Islam. That will be our enemy. So they manufactured this monster so that they could keep going the territory. Now we were voted into being number one enemy of civilization. Without our choice, we were volunteered for this job so that the Pentagon keep running. So, in every case, if you look at the archaeology of knowledge, you will acquire deep knowledge. If you think of true or false, how many terrorism incidents there are, if you look at the statistics, they don't reveal anything. Research involves going beneath the surface to dig out the truth. Okay, I'll